point. Well, let's shift gears a little bit here. Talk about the United Nations. I'm told that if you become a non-governmental organization registered with the United Nations, you are required not to oppose the United Nations. So I would guess that Gun Owners of America has not asked for or gotten NGO status, but how about commenting on the NRA doing something like that?
Well, Gun Owners of America has not chosen to go the non-governmental organization route to be recognized by the United Nations, because the United Nations does require one to subscribe to the goals of the United Nations. The goals of the United Nations are obnoxious. The goals of the United Nations are antithetical to individual freedom. They're antithetical to the United States Constitution. And, you know, I can understand why the NRA would want to go through that process, because they understand that there's a lot of gun control being promoted at the United Nations, treaties and other foreign entangling devices, and they've decided that they want to be there to fight that. I think the best way for us to fight it, frankly, is to lobby, which we've done, to turn off the money that goes to the United Nations. If we turn that money off, again, bureaucrats don't volunteer. And they're not going to be trying to take our guns away if 25% of their budget all of a sudden drops through the floor.
Okay. You've been attacked because you have, on more than one occasion, spoken to groups that are considered to be white supremacists. Comment on that, if you will.
I've spoken to crowds where there were white supremacists. I've also been to meetings and press conferences with the ACLU, who support all kinds of social issues that I strongly disagree with. Working with other people and seeking their support for your goals no more means that you end up agreeing with their overall program than it does that if you go into a garage that you've all of a sudden become a car. I'm simply there to get their support for the very public agenda of Gun Owners of America. If they're willing to work with us on that agenda, their postcard is going to count the same as somebody else's postcard that might be an ACLU member sending in. There are an occasional ACLU pro-gun person, usually in the states like Idaho and Wyoming and so forth. Those postcards all count when they come into Congress, and that's what we're trying to do, is maximize the impact that gun owners have before the Congress.
So same argument, speaking to an English first group, you would be looked upon as somebody who's anti-immigration or something, but that's not your issue.
I did set up an organization called English First, and one of the reasons I did it is because I speak fluent Spanish. And my wife is foreign-born, and we speak Spanish at home, and I've organized an Hispanic church within our Anglo congregation. So if you come into our church on Sunday morning, there'll be a Chinese sermon being preached at 11 o'clock. Same hour, there'll be a Spanish language sermon and one in English. And I don't know that that really is I don't think I'm dressed properly to be the poster boy for racism.
Very good. What percentage of the congressmen, you got 435 in the House, 100 in the Senate, what percentage would you say are on our side or on your side?
When you ask about somebody in the Congress or any legislative body being on our side, I hate to sound like Bill Clinton, but it depends on what you mean by is. People that are on your side who fill out questionnaires and who in conversation tell you, I'm opposed to this, I support that, that's comforting, that's nice to know, and I think typically when they tell you that, particularly in writing, they probably are speaking truthfully, but they get wobbly when they get into a legislative arena. And as one of our guys said recently, in the Senate, the rules are very favorable to being able to obstruct bad legislation to keep it from happening. but we don't really have any senators there that consistently are willing to use those rules. In the House of Representatives, we have a number of men and women who are willing to try to obstruct bad legislation, but the rules are much less favorable. And so one of the things that would be nice would be to get some people that are willing. We need a coalition of the willing, if you will, in the United States Senate, so we could try to make some things happen there.
But you don't want to put a percentage on the...
If you define on our side as being willing to go to the mat and fight, we don't have anybody consistently in the Senate. In the House of Representatives, we probably have 10 or 20.
That's small.
Well, one need not be too concerned about the minority numbers, because God certainly hasn't used majorities throughout history, and if you read history, you realize that minorities are the ones that make things happen, for good or for ill. And one senator could tie up the whole body if he were ornery enough to do it using the rules. And even in the House, it can be done if there are enough there, maybe probably 40 would be a very comfortable number to fight a rearguard action using the rules of the House that would almost have the same effect as a filibuster would in the Senate. So that would get the leadership's attention. Okay, what is it going to take to get you off our case? And that's when concessions coming our way can be made.
You have success in converting anti-gun activists, and I've seen where people who are anti a position that I hold, who could be persuaded out of it, were very valuable allies. And so I'm wondering if you've had any success with anti-gun activists becoming strong supporters of your view.
We haven't seen anti-gun activists converting the way you've seen it in, say, the pro-life arena. We've seen people change their view. There's a saying that a liberal who's been mugged is now a conservative, that he changed his view on guns at least. But that doesn't mean that he was necessarily an activist. And I look at the numerous opportunities we have on television and radio to present our views to the American people as not likely to convert my sparring partner, who's usually opposed to me on these debate formats, but I do think it gives us an opportunity to present information to the American people that otherwise is filtered by the media. And in that regard, we have seen since 1980, starting there, surveys were saying that perhaps as much as 80% of the people, if you just ask them, it's kind of a silly question because they don't know how much already there is, but do you think there should be more gun control? Back in 1980, 80% of the people tended to say, yeah. Now, when you ask that same silly question, it's down to about 51%, and almost all of the other are opposed to that. And some of that 47, 49% would like to actually see rollback. So I think we are gradually, steadily seeing a change in Americans' thinking, and which the Supreme Court ought to keep in mind, because if they rule outrageously, which I'm concerned that they might on the D.C. gun ban case, that could produce a considerable contempt of court, because most people are getting just a little fed up with a court that can find rights in the shadow of the penumbra that are obviously not written in the Constitution, and yet something as plain and simple as the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed might elude them. I think that would conceivably have quite an impact in the presidential elections, and in the since they're all anti-gun in the presidential, the most likely candidates, certainly in the congressional races, that could make a difference.